Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
I'm Pete Wright. You don't win podcasts with nice, Andy.
Today we are talking about minute 24, which begins with Phillips and Erskine still arguing, and ends with Rogers throwing himself on a grenade. Joining us on the show today and the rest of the week, we have Father David Mowry. Hello, Father.
Guys, do you know how much groveling I had to do in front of Senator What's-His-Name in order to get onto this podcast? So throw me a bone here, all right? Let's talk about the most famous scene from Captain America's origin story in this movie.
In this movie is right, because it's definitely a movie thing, not something that's discussed much in the comics.
We don't get the grenade on the comic.
He's just instantly Captain America.
Yeah.
It's like he gets the super soldier serum and he's just perfect.
He's already perfect.
Well, and I did bring up earlier in the week, there is that 4-issue series that came out in 91, The Adventures of Captain America, that actually goes through more of the boot camp stuff. That's where we were introduced to Gilmore Hodge. And so I think if you're going to look at a storyline where there's going to be a little more to it, then you're going to find it there. But largely, like this kind of self-sacrificial element of him, you're not seeing because he's just naturally already like the perfect hero for us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's such a shame. It's such a shame because this is such a perfect moment. And especially because we've already seen him bullied and we've already seen him then recover from being bullied and be truly ingenious with the flagpole. And now we get to see his humanity and his willingness to sacrifice. And I think it makes the end of this montage brilliant.
Before we get to that, let's finish on our conversation between Erskine and Colonel Phillips. I love the confidence, the sheer confidence that Erskine has that Steve is the clear choice. But then you get Colonel Phillips and his reaction, which is just, I mean, he's just so good. And this is why Tommy Lee Jones is perfect as this character. His whole thing about when you brought a 90-pound asthmatic on my army base, I let it slide. So, okay, first of all, that's an interesting point because now we know this is his army base and he is letting this division, the SSR, come in to do these tests here. So presumably there is basic training going on. They are just kind of doing these tests. So I thought that was great to know. But also this line, I thought he'd be useful to you like a gerbil. I never thought you'd pick him. That line and then the reaction is just such a small look. But the one that Stanley Tucci throws him, it is just perfect. It is such a great little look. What do you think? What do you two think of this moment?
The interaction between Erskine and Phillips, it's really good here because you expect the military guy to be a complete blowhard and just to be overruling the pencil-neck scientist. But there's more of a peer-to-peer relationship here where there's been some give and take, where Phillips has wanted this. He wanted to set this project up. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stuck his neck out with Senator What's-His-Name. But he
Good
also
old Senator
had...
What's-His-Name.
Yeah, exactly. And he also has some expectations on his own. Like, look, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. I want a great army. I want a super soldier. And I want to pick the best candidate on my terms, even though it's Erskine's formula that he's using. So even before, like we mentioned, Erskine talking about him being the clear choice. I think Erskine picked Rogers as soon as he saw him. I mean, from the moment they talked in the examination room at the expo, Erskine had already had him in mind, which is one of the reasons why I think Rogers is still here, because he has Erskine advocating for him every time, there may be talk about, okay, the 90-pound asthmatic, let's just get him off this. Why are we torturing this poor kid? Let's send him back to Queens.
So he can go collect scrap metal with Timmy.
Way to go, Timmy.
Right. Yeah, I think that is very true. And I think a lot of this is probably, let's put him in a situation where we can observe him with other soldiers, other privates, other people, and see how he reacts. Is he going to cower? Is he going to stand up to them quietly? Is he going to kind of exhibit a side of himself that might be a little more of the I'm defending myself by being a jerk to you sort of way. Like, how is he going to come across? But I think to Erskine's great joy, he exhibits himself exactly as he thought he would, as kind of that quiet stoic. And I'm toughing it out, and I can barely do a push-up. I can barely do a jumping jack, but I'm going to keep trying.
Makes me cry.
Makes me cry.
It's the best part. You put a needle in his arm, it'll go right through it.
Tommy Lee Jones, again, perfect. This is just perfect.
Yeah.
The way that he's playing this.
And when Tommy Lee Jones delivers those lines, when Phillips says those, it's a masterclass in acting, because there's no personal animus that Phillips has against Rogers. He is not out to get Rogers. He's not out to undermine him at this point. He's just looking at it in terms of who's the best candidate. We need to get this done because we have a war to win. And you get a sense that there is some authentic concern that Phillips has for the kid. Like, you stick a needle in his arm, it's going to go right through him. Like, this kid doesn't belong here. Get him out of here, because this isn't what's best for him. And that endears me to Phillips' character, even though he's going to be the military tough guy throughout the rest of the movie and going to give Captain America a hard time. This scene, even though he's against Rogers being the candidate, still I get a better sense for the investment Phillips has made into the program here.
It's an interesting program that they have set up here, because as Erskine says, I am looking for qualities beyond the physical. Like, he's looking for something more with this particular character. But by putting him into a situation where almost all they do are physical tests, it is kind of an interesting way to kind of approach it. I mean, obviously it's a soldier program. They're looking for a super soldier. So there is a big physical element. But and I know we've talked a lot about this point over these last few minutes, but it is interesting that we get so little other than the flagpole. And you can really see, as you kind of have this conversation here, why they decided to add that flagpole scene, because they're like, all we're showing are physical bits here. Shouldn't we have something else that shows us a little more with Steve? And so it's interesting the way they approach that.
And isn't it beautiful that this last exhibit of who he is both not physical, but also supremely physical, right? That his sacrifice is a sacrifice of body. It's like the ultimate physical sacrifice to jump on a grenade. And I think that is a really powerful expression of who Steve is, that he is a 90-pound asthmatic. And that grenade's going to turn him to powder. Like, still, everybody's still going to get injured because he's saving nobody. He's confetti. But it is an expression, and it's almost a shame that the minute cuts off when it does, and that we have to leave the punchline for the next minute. But it is a perfect expression and a cap on all of the examples of who Steve is, the victim, the genius, and now the sacrifice. You see what I did there?
I see what you did there. It's a cap on everything that Steve is. Yeah, it was very, very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what would happen if Gilmore Hodge threw himself onto that grenade? You would end up with bits of Lex shrapnel in everybody.
Oh my God. I was already ready to shame you for that.
I had to top Pete. No.
But you did it. I was going to come in hard on you for that, but you won this round. That was amazing. That was absolutely amazing.
Well, and it is interesting that Phillips uses a physical metaphor for what they're looking for. You win wars with guts. But guts it's a metaphoric way of talking about something. It's not just your intestines. There is a strength of character. There's a willingness to do the hard thing that wins the war. And so the grenade test is the way they're going to test for the guts of these men, that it's not about just niceness. It's being willing to be the leader, to respond to danger in a way that fits with the danger they're going to have these men go through by undergoing the super soldier serum.
What is his goal, though? Like, showing that a soldier has guts. What is he hoping that they would do with a live grenade, like, in the middle of their thing? Like, are they going to throw it in a particular direction? From what I can tell, there are soldiers in every direction. And I'm like, is the idea to just throw it, or are they hoping that, whoever it was going to be would do this sacrificial thing here.
Yeah, I think that was his plan. I think he wanted Hodge to be the guy to jump on it. I think that's what he was.
Okay, because as a leader, you might say, "I'm going to grab this grenade and I'm going to huck it as far as I can." Yeah. It's just what are they going to do with it? But yeah.
Yeah, because he already knew that it was like a training grenade, right? I mean, he wasn't a live grenade, and so he knew what was happening, and he wanted to demonstrate to Erskine that it was his guy after all that was going to be the guy. And player, thou playedst.
It would be great
yourself.
though if it was Hodge and he like grabbed it and like chucked it into the truck.
Yeah,
it's like run. It's like that's completely useless. It is. These are M56 training grenades. And actually, like if you're watching the film and actually you're paying attention to the box, it says that right on the side. It's like no secret that these are actually training grenades. Yeah. And I think that's very funny that I mean, because as an audience member, it like I don't think I was paying attention to that at all. And I was just like, what is he doing? Like this is crazy. But yeah, it's a great little moment the way they play it.
Totally.
Tommy Lee Jones makes that grenade look so cool. He pulls the pin, he releases the spring primer. It just so so cool as he does that.
This is one of those things though, and I don't know if this is one of those cases, but you have these fantastic aging actors, these iconic actors, and you hear them interviewed about their role in film, and they come back not truly knowing what movie they were in, what the movie's about, what they're doing, and it's a little bit heartbreaking. And I look at Tommy Lee Jones and I think you are doing amazing work for me as a fan of superheroes, and I can't stop and think about the fact that you don't really care about being in this movie right now. Like, this is not a thing that you're really caring about. And if at the time you're recording this movie, you even know what it's titled, I'll count that as a massive win.
Well, that's the Alec Guinness paradox. Yeah. Right? Some of the best parts of the movie are the actors who hate it the most.
Hate it the most, right?
Yeah.
It's a paycheck, right? I don't know if I don't think he's probably as like unaware as Gwyneth Paltrow seems to have painted herself.
Gwyneth Paltrow, who literally didn't remember she was in some of the movies.
Well, to be fair, like they have these people come back for a scene. Like when they're doing these cameo bits, it can be very hard to figure out what was that cameo bit for? Like, was that for this one or that one? Like I can see confusion when it comes to these little tiny pieces where they're asking you to do something.
Sure. And for actors that have massive, massive catalogs, like I get that they all start to blend together in some respects. So,
but the way that Tommy Lee Jones shouts "grenade" is that is just the platonic form of a military officer shouting "grenade."
Yeah.
That needs to be taught at West Point. This is how you announce the presence of a grenade, because the cadence is perfect, the growl in the voice is so good, and just the bark behind his voice, it's just the sharp crack of an exclamation just cuts through everything. Oh, well, man.
And I mean, to that point, like there are troops. If you watch the people in the background, like other troops like far in the back also are like ducking down and hiding and making sure that they're all safe. So it's great that obviously his voice carries in order to convey, be aware and pay attention because something dangerous could be happening here. So yeah, it works really well.
Now, but before we move on, I do need to note the ladies' count is now at 3.
Yes.
Now we're playing a little fast and loose because here Peggy calls the men girls instead of ladies, but I believe in the spirit of the ladies' count that still applies. So we are still heaping this particular kind of reverse psychology motivation on these 1940s manly men.
It's so good. We'll have to keep this up because I'm going to have to see how many more times we go through this.
Truly.
All right. Well, I think it's time for some Christ in the Cape. So, Father David Mowry, take the floor.
So for this minute, it's clear that there's a theme of self-sacrifice that is presented here, with a grenade being thrown into the midst of the troops, and how everyone responds to that presence of danger. Because there's a very strong self-preservation instinct that we have as human beings. It's very helpful, evolutionarily speaking, that those who ran away from danger and didn't get eaten are the ones who lived. And so that's very strongly in us. And I think it's important to recognize that we can fantasize about being the people who are going to run headlong into danger to save people from the burning building, or to stand up to the violent threat, or whatever it might be. But flight or fight is a very strong response, and we're more attuned to flight than we are to fighting. And then to have something where you can't fight, it's just a grenade, I can't do anything about it. I don't think it's fair for anyone to blame Hodge for running away from the grenade, because it's a grenade. You can't bully a grenade. It's just going to blow up in your face. That said, so why is it that this happens at all? Then so many recipients of the Medal of Honor in the United States are posthumous recipients who have thrown themselves on grenades. There's a famous case of a soldier in the Pacific Theater who put 2 live grenades underneath his helmet and took that blast in order to save the members of his platoon. And so many Medals of Honor have been given to soldiers who have done precisely this. I would say that first, this idea of self-sacrifice, first, it requires a strong habit of virtue. That is, you have habituated yourself to responding to danger in this courageous and self-sacrificing way, because you need a equally strong habit to overcome that habit of self-preservation. That when you see the person in danger, you have a moral habit, a way of responding to that kind of overrides your kind of initial nature. It's what we mean when we talk about people doing things as second nature. It means they've built up this habit to do things without thinking, because that's what this act really requires. And what this represents is a kind of altruistic suicide, because Steve Rogers thinks it's a real grenade and he is jumping on top of it to save other people. Now, it's also interesting to note, Peggy also moves towards the grenade when it is thrown into the midst of the soldiers. So it's really interesting that both Peggy and Steve have the same kind of moral character. Both are so habituated in that virtue of courage and that virtue of self-sacrifice, they move toward that. There was a 1978 study of this kind of altruistic suicide, and it found that it requires kind of membership in a group with a high cohesion, that you have to have this sense of really belonging to the people around you. And that's interesting because for Steve, he's in this situation where there is not a lot of high group cohesion because they're in competition with one another. But that speaks to Steve's moral character. He's able to see his membership with these men, even though he has not been made to feel like he's part of them. And in the military, this kind of altruistic suicide, it's actually more prevalent among enlisted men than it is among officers, whether non-commissioned or otherwise. So it's the grunts who are more likely to do this, that there is this sense of, I'm going to do what I can, and my value is in what I can do for these other people, to lay down my life for my brothers in arms. And then here comes that Christ example, that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that kind of altruistic suicide of Christ, that we can frame it in that way, is really interesting, because Jesus makes it very clear throughout the Gospels. He knows what's coming. He says multiple times to his disciples, the Son of Man will be killed and on the third day be raised, but he knows that death is coming for him. Here, what's interesting with Jesus, this altruistic suicide is not a snap decision, but it's something that's steadily contemplated and then prayerfully accepted. And in the Christian understanding of Jesus, he is fully God and fully man. He has the power to avoid death altogether. Steve Rogers is just a 90-pound asthmatic, but Jesus is the Son of God. And yet, Jesus chooses, again, that weakness. He chooses to embrace what's coming in the cross in order to achieve what comes about from that self-sacrifice, that it is not death, but life that comes forth from the cross. And here is ultimately what's at the root of whether it's the soldier jumping on the grenade or it's that perfect expression of love in Christ's death and resurrection. It's achieving that higher good, that there is something beyond my individual life that I am able to further by giving myself in this way. And that is something valued in the Christian church through the example of the martyrs, through those who see their faith in Christ and their love for their fellow disciples as something greater than their own individual life. And this is why I love Captain America. It's why he's my favorite Avenger, because he sees himself as something bigger than just himself. That while he is going to be a super soldier and he's going to be Captain America and he is going to be a very important part of the Avengers, all of that is caught up with an awareness that there is something bigger than me. And there's something I'm willing to give everything I have in order for that bigger thing to happen. And it's very easy to hitch that to a jingoistic patriotism here in World War II. But part of what Captain America will have to do is realize, okay, there's something beyond just America that I'm fighting for. There is some bigger mission that I am a part of.
We really see the way that plays in this moment, and you certainly will get more of that in the next minute as it kind of wraps up, but you get that sense of Steve looking at this as a situation where it's like, it's not about me, I need to save these people, who, other than Hodge, as you said, we'll just say, aren't treating me that well. We'll just use that as a thing, whatever. But the system looks at him as less than, I guess we'll just say. But he's still willing to sacrifice himself in order to save it and preserve that. And I think it's pretty big.
Even Hodge.
Yeah.
Even Hodge.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, Hodge would, if the grenade went off, he wouldn't feel a thing because he's so perfectly.
He would have been fine.
Man, did he go fast to hide behind that truck? His face, so good, so good,
so good.
Just one last note that I forgot to mention: we do through dialogue get an introduction to Senator Brandt. As Senator what's his name, and then of course Erskine says Brandt. Yes, I know. So we do get that. We'll meet him. But otherwise, I think we're good. So any last thoughts from you, Pete?
I wasn't ready. No, I don't. I actually have no more thoughts.
No more. That was the
I'm
end.
empty.
That was the end of your thoughts.
That was the end. You've reached the end of our broadcast day.
It's like that commercial with that guy who finishes surfing the web. Do you remember that commercial? He's like, I did it.
I got to the end of the web. That's it.
All right, Father David, tell everyone where they can find more about you.
You can find me on my website, fatherdavidmowry.com. I've put links there to all of my various podcast appearances. And if you're looking for something that is equally philosophical and meditative, but it's kind of outside the superhero genre, I was on Robert E.G. Black's podcast of 5 Minutes of Arrival, talking about the Amy Adams vehicle of science fiction and talking about language and philosophy and the moral and philosophical questions that are raised by that. It was a really great discussion about a movie I really enjoy. So that would be my recommendation to check out.
Great movie. Man, that movie's so good.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back with you one last minute. Tomorrow we'll be discussing minute 25. Until then, Pete, thanks as always.
I'll be back tomorrow with what's his name.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.